Well, hello there, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Working Ant with me, your host and coach, Rami Balut. Possibilities. We are always chasing possibilities. We are striving to achieve the possible. And there's so much talk around, achieving the impossible. What was once thought impossible somehow became possible. And with the influx of requests and the influx of tasks and asks that are coming your way, you're achieving the possible, sometimes feeling impossible to achieve them. But nevertheless, they are being pushed out. You're achieving objectives, you're achieving asks. Despite the pushback, despite the pressure, despite the long nights, and sometimes the weekends, you're able to achieve so much of what you've set out to achieve. And whether or not this actually has been because of you being proactive and taking the reins and doing things on your own and on your own terms, or whether or not things are coming your way, you are achieving the possible. And at times we may think, like, my gosh, what's ahead of me may be impossible, but we all know just how strong your willpower is, and how much, if you want something, you'll typically go out and get it done and make sure you button it up and ship it out when it's been asked of you or when it's demanded that you do fulfill your obligations. And today is actually about looking at the possible, but from a different realm here. What I want to do is provoke some thought around like how we view what we set out to achieve, and how it is we can benefit the most from those achievements. And this primarily comes, at least to me and to my desk, because of a lot of what I've been hearing lately. This may come from direct messages from you, some comments, on my podcast here on The Working Out, or even like watching my video version of this at Coach Rami on YouTube. But it's turning around so much work, makes me, of course, as your coach, feel a little concerned because, hey, we may not actually be thinking through what our level of profitability is. And here today, what I want to share with you are just some approaches and considerations, perhaps alternatives you can consider, and how you go about achieving what you're set out to achieve, but also making time and space for the profitability of those possibilities that you achieve. So a nice little rhyme to that, nice little jive to that. I hope that's a way you can actually remember it and retain it. So, before you go out and achieve the possible, make sure it is profitable. And this can go, for what you consider to be something impossible or a stretch goal or whatever it is, but, making sure that it actually, in fact, is profitable. And what do I mean by profitability here really is relative to you and what it is that you value. So I think it's very important to actually, put this out there and try to really understand, like, hey, what do we mean here by profitability? I've mentioned several times that, passion and profession, and at times with purpose, leads to a level of profitability. And here it's no different when we are achieving or setting out to achieve all these goals that we've set out for. And what we fail to do many of times is take the space to reflect on these things and understand that, hey, you know what? If I'm actually going to pursue an objective, if I'm going to pursue a goal, how about I ensure fairly early on that this goal is going to be profitable for me? And so what do I mean by profitability? Profitability can be anything from you striving to achieve more financial gain. It could be anything from title, scope, impact, meaning at work, the relationships you've built, the significance you get from the work that you do. It could be learnings, perhaps. It could be, new knowledge that you may acquire along the way. And it could be, a multitude of things. But primarily, there's a reason behind someone's feeling of profitability. Some people may think profitability is primarily for financial reasons, while others may say, hey, you know what? It's the scope and the impact that I make. And again, others like myself, for example, would say, hey, profitability is really around relationships. The deeper relationships I have in my life, the more connected I feel to the people that I work with and interact with, hey, the better quality and fulfillment I will have in my life. And I mean, I've said this many of times, I'm not alone in saying this, so much of the quality and happiness of our life is contingent on, the quality of the relationships that we built, the number of very deep and meaningful relationships we actually build. And, from my world and my perspective, it's all about that. Those relationships are what create a lot of meaning in life. And so my profitability is fairly clear from that compass. But what's yours? What's your profitability? What do you deem as something profitable for yourself? If you're thinking about all the work that you're doing, all the sacrifices you're actually making, the late nights, maybe the inability to push back these days. I know so many of you have been impacted, not just by layoffs, being actually laid off, but also taking on so much more of the portfolio, the work, the impact, the scope, the expectations of those that are no longer on your team. And that actually is something, that happens in cycles like these, but it's also an opportunity for you to actually take a giant step back, even though you may say to yourself, like, Rami, how on earth am I going to take a giant step back now, especially now when I need to be turning things around, pushing things out, delivering, buttoning things up, because you know what? I've got a job. I'm secure. I need to make sure it stays that way and sort of ride out this financial storm that we're currently in. And, I would actually encourage you to at least take a long, deep pause over what on earth is your profitability here. And I think here, the only real way, you should look at this realm is, hey, you know what? What is possible for me should also be profitable for me. And I know there's a lot of, thinking around like, okay, I don't have control over what it is I'm being asked to do. There are so many things that come my way that are just expected of me. I don't see anything here perhaps resonating with me in totality. And so how can I make something that I do profitable? Well, stick around for a moment. I'm going to share with you how. In fact, I think, for those of us that truly believe that we are in the depths, like even more than knee deep, perhaps like neck deep, in the work that we're doing. And so there's absolutely no way we can make a level of profitability out of this. Well, I have news for you. I think, there's definitely an alternative for you to consider as you go about your day to day. Now, this may not be the role that you actually want to be in for the long run, but nevertheless, we want to make the best out of our current situation, whatever situation that is. And I've always been the type to say, you know what, if you're getting paid $1 and you agree to that dollar, then you work for that dollar, because that's the noble and the respectful thing to do. Doesn't mean that you have to just be silent about this dollar and just go be miserable about it. No, we want to make this dollar holler and actually make a little bit more profitability in the process here, at minimum by considering the following things. Number one, from a general lens, from a general perspective here, familiarize yourself with yourself. I'll say that again. Familiarize yourself with yourself. And this is sort of like where you could connect the dots back to some patterns that you've had, perhaps from early childhood, how you've been, triggered by things, why you perhaps value one thing over another, why for one reason or another, you may obsess over one thing and not obsess over something else, why, you may feel like, hey, you know what, social interactions are a necessity for me, and why you may feel otherwise completely, why you may feel like, hey, you know what, getting good visibility into my work is, the thing to do, because the work needs to speak not just for itself, but I need to speak for it. And you may have other people that'll say, you know what? No, not at all. It's the work that's going to speak for itself. I don't need to speak for it. In fact, I don't even want to speak for the work. And if I actually do, I'm probably not in the right place. And so, there are many reasons why we're triggered, why we value things over another, why we may feel very, very happy one day with something that was said to us or something that was done for us, or perhaps being recognized for something unexpectedly. versus other days where we're like, you know what, what's all this for? I'm feeling so down. I don't really understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's like the cyclical thing. I'm like in a rat race. I'm going down this hole and I really cannot find a way and even understand how on earth I'm going to dig myself out of it. Well, you know what? I want to make sure that, you at least, take some time to truly understand yourself. This could be even like how you learn, and how you sort of receive information and having that information retain. It could be something, hey, you know what, in a conversation like this, or watching me on video, or listening to someone on your way down to work, whatever it is, I think you need to familiarize yourself with yourself. And I think when you do that, you're sort of like really understanding like, okay, this is what I really value. This is what really drives me. This could be a form of my profitability. How do I ensure I'm extracting the most value out of that profitability for the time that I'm being put into work? And the reality is we're being paid for our services, right? I mean, you are getting a paycheck for your services, your rendered services, week after week, month over month, quarter after quarter, year after year, getting paid for your services. And so here, think about how you can make that work more profitable for yourself. This in many ways has a lot to do with how you feel about the work that you're doing, irrespective of whether or not you feel like, my gosh, this work is really taking its toll on me. I don't know how I'm going to make this profitable for myself, Rami. I would say, think about perhaps the next role or position you're going to take. Look at that role description, look at the requirements of that role, and try to align some of the work that you're doing with some of those requirements. And if you can't get those requirements right, perhaps start associating a narrative on how those requirements actually relate. Maybe you want to think about even like taking some additional work outside of the work that you're actually doing, sort of contribute to that and generate a stronger, more compelling narrative when the time comes and you're speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager. You may be in a position today where you're like, okay, well, how do I make what I do profitable? This maybe involves like putting together a narrative over reflecting on the work that you're actually doing, the opportunities you could be creating, the strategy you may feel like you could set forth if it was your decision. What could you do if it was your decision to do so? What could you do if it was your decision to do so? And a lot of that generates a level of profitability because at minimum, it builds up our level of credibility with those around us. So instead of just doing the work and letting it go and shipping it out until we get something else, talk about it. Put a narrative around it. Talk through how you interact with the people that helped you put this all together. Talk through how you could have done it differently had it been your decision. Talk about a strategy or an alternative that could be considered in the future, making something like this faster or with more impact or more efficient. Question the why. It's almost like, going back, I think, to an earlier podcast this year where like, do you know what your job is? Like, do you really know what your job is? And I think here, if you really understand what your work is and you get a good understanding and indication of, hey, what you're measured by, well, then you can actually create the space for yourself and think through like, how can I make this actually profitable for me? If this is something that I'm aligned to, how can I capitalize on this stuff? How can I let more people know about the quality of work that I actually do? What kind of conversations do I need to have with not just with myself, but obviously with my peers, with my manager, with my skip level, with my stakeholders, with my customers, with my customers' customers? How can I find this necessary information that aligns with me at my core, right? Who it is that I actually am, what I deem to be profitable, and perhaps then we can actually create a space where we're thinking through like, hey, you know what, on this task, on this assignment, on this item that I've been given, I'm going to make the possible profitable. I'm going to think through how I can use this to my advantage. It could be as simple as documenting this information in a centralized location so other people can access it and you can help others through a form of like education. It could be you going on a roadshow and telling people about the work that you're actually doing, maybe volunteering yourself in other people's meetings. It could be bringing some other people in and sharing with them the work that you're actually doing. It could be updating your LinkedIn profile. It could be reaching out to a future employer, a future hiring manager, someone you may have worked with in the past and you want to share about what it is that you're doing today and see how that actually lands. If you've taken my programs, we call this the Fabulous Five. someone that can give you honest and sincere advice, questioning whether or not, your approach is logical, reasonable, wise, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot to this idea of profitability when we look at the possibilities that we are pursuing. And so I want you to really, sort of like get this into like a way of thinking when you're doing something. So if you're spending more time in meetings than you should be, hey, you know what? Is this actually profitable for me? I know it's possible to actually have these conversations. I can listen all day. But is it actually profitable for me? Hey, you know what? I am known for submitting these reports, filing these communications every single month, sending it out to a plethora of people that have come to rely and depend on my work. Hey, is that actually profitable for me? Do I know who's reading this? Do I know what they're actually doing with it? Maybe I should stop altogether and see if someone comes back and says, hey, I missed your report and you didn't send it out this week. Well, then that person individually is profiting from your work. Hey, what do they do? And how are they profiting from your work? Maybe that level of profitability they're making can have a little bit of extra change for us. And these are sort of the ways to think through how we make the possible profitable. And, it's just a nice little framework for you to think about, on like what's really sticking right now. What's really working for you right now? How can you get in a rhythm of not just making things work for you over what's possible, but make them work over what's profitable? And again, here, profitability is your definition to create. It's relative to you and what it is that you value. But I think here you should understand like what it is that you actually value, what it is you in fact deem profitable, how it is you actually came to value one thing over another. And if that's the case and you just accept the fact that, hey, you know what? Profitability to me simply means more financial independence. It means building up a quality of life that I can maintain and sustain for my family. And so maybe that's what profitability is for you. Maybe profitability for you is being able to work anywhere in the world and not have to worry about showing up to an office and sitting around a bunch of people and having to go through that all over again. And maybe for others, it's like, no, I've got to be in front of people. I've got to rub shoulders with people. I've got to see human flesh in the front of my eye. And I can't do this anymore. Maybe that's a level of profitability for you. Think through what's profitable. And, when you're thinking about like your career, especially for those of you that are either leading or influencing without a strong level of authority, think through how you want to use this level of profitability to promote your personal brand. And oftentimes we're working so hard. Oftentimes we don't talk about our work enough to actually value the work that we do. And, I always like look at it from this lens. There's this old like eBay commercial, I think very, very early on, where I think someone was in a greenhouse with green carpets, with a green couch, with a green lawn. Everything was green. And, he's checking up on a car. Someone was posting it somewhere in the country. And I think there was like some interaction over this car, over like, how on earth is this car going to potentially sell? At least that's the feeling this commercial gave. And yet this green car was perfect for this person living in that greenhouse with everything green around them. There's someone that's going to appreciate the work that you do, the craftsmanship that you create, but you've got to be able to make the space to make it profitable. So if you had just a few resources around you and you were using these resources to make what you do profitable, what would you do? What would you construct? What would you craft? How would you communicate that? How would you collaborate with others, in the sphere of this level of profitability? How can you use this level of profitability to perhaps promote others along the way? I simply want you to think about, hear me out here, all these things that you're doing, all the time that you're actually spending, all the sacrifices you're making, all those like long nights, right? And then calls or, hours that you're putting in. I mean, I don't know, obviously, every intricate detail of the level of effort that you put in, but I've got to believe with conviction that you are putting in so much effort, so much dedication towards your craft, towards your work. It may be something of your choosing, and you know what? It may not be your day, But at minimum, I want you to be profitable about the work that you do. I think it's only deserving of you to think about things this way. Even if you may not be happy about the work that you're doing, remember, turning it into some level of profitability really ensures that you're maximizing your own return on investment for the time that you're putting in. And here, again, it may be a time where you just want to ride out this storm, where you want to see what's going to happen, ride these waves, make sure that, hey, you know what? Whatever's going to happen over the next year or so, I'm going to ensure that I stay in this game and play it through to the end until things open up again. And then I can start thinking about more possibilities for myself. Fine. But if you are chasing after and working towards what is possible, think through how you can make it profitable. All right. And so I'll stop there. I hope this was helpful. If it was, let me know. Love to hear that through comments, chat, ads, whatever, you name it. I love spending my time with you. I hope this actually added some level of thinking for you. A lot of times, my clients will just, write this stuff down and map it out to some of the activities they're doing on a day-to-day. And when they do a level of audit over like what they supply and they receive, they'll actually find at least, some sort of indication over whether or not they're on the right path to achieve profitability according to their goals, according to their values, according to their principles, or that something needs to actually change along the way. And it could be a narrative. It could be someone, you are not communicating to that you could communicate to moving forward. It could be something different altogether. Whatever it may be, make sure that the work that you do, make sure that you make the possible profitable. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for spending your time with me this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are, wherever it is that you're listening to this. I wish you well. I truly do. Please take good care of yourself. Know that you are valued. Know that you have so much to contribute to this world, but do so by contributing first and foremost to yourself. And until then, I'll see you next time here on The Working Ant. Thank you so much for watching.